I now give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation. Thank you very much, Mr. President. President, we're very pleased to see you chairing the Security Council. The Russian Federation wholeheartedly shares the common international concerns about the issues that are at the center of our debate today. The consequences of climate change, natural disasters and terrorism are disasters that are cross-border in their nature and require the activation of international cooperation. We are committed to work on these priorities. Another subject was also proposed for discussion by our colleagues from Niger, and that's the possible connection between terrorism and climate change and issues of security, and the role of the UN Security Council in this context. Firstly, on climate change. This is an issue that takes up a very important place for us in a national context and also in international cooperation. According to our calculations, the climate in Russia is warming 2.5 times faster than the global average. At the same time, we see ever more destructive natural phenomena, and a need to cut greenhouse gases and adapt to the negative consequences of climate change is obvious to us. On the 29th of October this year, there was a governmental order of the Russian Federation that established a strategy for low-carbon socio-economic development to last to 2050. This, in particular, stipulates the goal of achieving a balance between human-made greenhouse gas emissions and the mitigation of those, the capture of that carbon, by 2060. In the spirit of such approaches, the Russian delegation played an active role in the 26th session of the Conference of the Parties to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change in Glasgow and helped achieve a consensus. We think that what made the success in Glasgow possible was a balance between the interests of the climate, environmental protection, and the socio-economic interests of countries that are at different levels of development and therefore different levels of vulnerability. Help in protecting countries from climate change and natural disasters is an important element in national efforts and international global cooperation, first and foremost in the framework of the UN development system. That said, on the agenda, there are a range of different sub-subjects, from the increasing level of the seas, which is an issue for island states, to the process of desertification in countries in Africa. These all require different approaches to assistance asked for by the states, the interested states. There is no disagreement that there's also a global character to cooperation to fight against international terrorism. We think that to define the threats and issues, member states are helped here by the monitoring from the counterterrorism activity by the United Nations Counterterrorism Committee, which uses its executive directorate to help prepare reports on the implementation by states of the specialized counterterrorism resolutions, in particular 1373 and 1624. This mechanism is able to cope with its work even in the pandemic. On the basis of its views, states can be provided with technical assistance through the specialized UN structures, such as the UN Office of Counterterrorism or Drugs and Crime. We stress here that this help should be provided at the request of the local authorities and considering the country and regional specifics, and there are many specifics. Thus, despite the fact there's an active fight going on with ISIL in Syria and Iraq, we're also seeing the terrorist threat spread from the Middle East and North Africa to neighboring countries and regions, first and foremost deeper into Africa. The reasons here are problems of border security, given that the borders are porous, the difficult socioeconomic conditions, the deepening crisis because of COVID-19, and also the weakness of central authorities on the ground. Terrorists are capably taking advantage of this, broadening their propaganda and finding new recruits from the dissatisfied population, first and foremost young people. There's also no disagreement that, for example, in the Sahel, there are many different factors that have come together into one knot. These include problems of extreme poverty, a lack of jobs, population growth, desertification, natural disasters, migration, internal conflicts, and terrorist activity. And the current situation with the coronavirus is also making the situation more difficult to solve. There's therefore a completely logical question. In order to solve these problems, what should the United Nations and the Security Council do? We have to recognize that our approach differs from the opinion of many of our Security Council colleagues. First and foremost, we are convinced that there is a need to look at each country or each region individually and in connection with other, often more significant factors that give rise to socioeconomic or political instability, including foreign intervention in states, or, on the other hand, a lack of assistance from outside, where the local authorities and the state institutions cannot cope with the task in front of them. A generic one-size-fits-all approach and some kind of automatic attribution of cause and consequence only will lead the Security Council down the wrong path to solving these problems. We're convinced that each of the negative factors here should be analysed and overcome with the consent of the national governments of the country recipients and making use of the specific expert potential and the toolkit that the UN has, once again, without some one-size-fits-all approach. We defended and will continue to defend the thesis that what the UN works effectively when it divides its labour. Forcing the climate monitoring into the mandate of peacekeeping operations or special political missions, detached from fundamental scientific work, would be a disastrous politicization of the climate agenda and would lead us away from unified and genuinely global cooperation, which is what the Paris Agreement and the UNFCCC are aimed at. Then, let's be honest, cutting greenhouse gas emissions in region A is not going to stop floods or droughts in region B over the next 50 or 100 years. Furthermore, in looking for the deep-rooted reasons for terrorism, moving the focus from poverty, sanctions, or weak state institutions to climate simply means going away from an open discussion of the reasons for the extreme vulnerability of states, in particular those who have suffered from foreign intervention. Can this really be helped by moving the discussion in the Security Council? For us, the connection between terrorism and climate change is not clear. Perhaps our colleagues, by including this in the Security Council's agenda, simply want to raise the profile of climate debate. However, I think that you would agree that whether any particular issue is included or not on the Security Council's agenda shouldn't serve as a yardstick for whether or not it is important. Climate change is certainly an issue where this is a concern. As part of its specific nature, it should be looked at with the involvement of all of the UN's members, and nothing can really be helped by including it on the Security Council with its limited membership and its very specific toolkit, but it certainly might lead to a muddle and a doubling of efforts. On the whole, we think that the potential for work on this issue within the UNFCCC, the General Assembly, the Economic and Social Council, the High-Level Political Forum, and the Peace Building Commission, as well as other different areas which would obey the division of labour within the UN in looking at these issues and the socio-economic recovery and development of these countries. These are areas that still have potential in these other bodies. In particular, developing countries need to strengthen their own potential for overcoming the obstacles to development they currently face, and also to have better and easier access to financing and participation in the global system of trade, to vaccines for COVID-19, and to the best technologies for early warning systems for extreme weather events, to humanitarian assistance, to education and training for the younger generation, in particular for women. We call for work to be carried out in these areas in these proper formats, leaving to the Security Council the responsibility for overcoming potential conflicts and future ones. Thank you. I thank the representative of the Russian Federation